The 12th studio album from Foo Fighters, Your Favorite Toy, drops this Friday, beginning a new era for the band with their new drummer Ilan Rubin and a fresh, raw sound on the new record. The album that is taking the Foos into the future. But it hasn't been an easy road to get to this new record. The death of the late great Taylor Hawkins, drummer drama, cheating scandals, and more. So, how did we get here? This is Foo Fighters, The Road to Your Favorite Toy. Foo Fighters hit the scene in 1995 with the release of the debut album. They've been a dominant force in rock music ever since. They wrote some of the biggest songs of that era: Monkey Wrench, Everlong, Learn to Fly, and the list goes on. After being a fixture in the rock music world for the better part of the 90s and 2000s and getting progressively bigger and bigger with every album they released, the Foos had a very busy decade in the 2010s, kicking off the decade with arguably their best album since the 90s with Wasting Light in 2011. Wasting Light showed that the Foos still had the juice when it came to writing hard-edged rock music mixed with Dave Grohl's unstoppable melodies, and they continued that momentum on 2014's album and documentary Sonic Highway, the well-received EP from 2015, St. Cecilia, and on 2017's Concrete and Gold, which is not an album that I loved, but it was really well received by the Foos fan base. After making their way through the pandemic in 2020, the Foos emerged in February 2021 with their 10th studio album, Medicine at Midnight, which saw the band recapturing some of their earlier magic, at least in my opinion. It features some great Foos songs like the title track, as well as Making a Fire, Cloud Spotter, and Love Dies Young. It was a solid start to their third full decade as a band. And for a while, the Foos were really on a roll. They started branching out and doing some very different stuff in 2021 with the release of the DG's Hail Satin EP for Record Store Day. Nobody ever expected the Foos to do an EP full of disco Bee Gees covers and for them to do it that well, but you know what? They made it work. Taylor Hawkins' vocals in particular on songs like Shadow Dancing really made it a special release. In February 2022, the band experimented even further by moving into the world of feature film with Studio 666, a horror film about the Foos renting an old house in Hollywood to make their new record as Dave Grohl becomes continually unhinged and possessed by an evil supernatural force, a force that leads him to murder his own bandmates. Did the Foos go too far by making a horror movie? I don't know. I was always a little bit weirded out by Studio 666, and I saw the movie in the theater, but was always weirded out by Dave Grohl killing his bandmates in various gory ways, especially Taylor Hawkins, who gets killed by having a drum cymbal slice off his head. So that was always a little bit weird for me, but maybe it was colored by what happened just a month later. The companion album for the film, Dream Widow, however, was an awesome record featuring Dave Grohl performing most of the music himself, and it was meant as an album within a film within an album, featuring tracks like Cold, March of the Insane, and The Sweet Abyss. It's one of the best Foos / Dave Grohl releases in a very long time. And then the unthinkable happened. Foo Fighters drummer and core member Taylor Hawkins passed away suddenly on March 25th, 2022, before a Foo Fighters scheduled show in Colombia. The band and the fan base of the Foo Fighters were shocked and devastated when Taylor Hawkins passed away in March of 2022. I still remember that day very well, just hearing the news and just being absolutely shocked about what happened. You know, Taylor Hawkins was the heart and soul of the Foo Fighters and was an incredible musician, an incredible person, and it's a loss that is still felt today. After a period of mourning, the band held 2 Taylor Hawkins tribute concerts in London and Los Angeles with an all-star lineup of musicians showing their love for Taylor, including Liam Gallagher playing with the Foo Fighters on Rock and Roll Star, which is a performance I never thought I'd see, Rush, Paul McCartney, Wolfgang Van Halen, The Darkness, and more. The shows proved just how much Taylor Hawkins was loved and had an impact on the fans and fellow musicians alike. But the question still remained: if the Foo Fighters continued, who would be the person to take over duties on the drum kit? In May 2023, we got our answer. Veteran drummer Josh Freese, who also played with the band during the Taylor Hawkins tribute concerts, was announced as the new drummer for Foo Fighters, which at the time made absolute sense. I think most of us would agree that Josh Freese was the best choice for the band at the time. He had the chops, he had the ability to take on their touring schedule, and he had the ability to play the Foo Fighters songs. And I think that he was the one to come in and take the reins of the rhythm section. But it wouldn't be too long before we would find out that Josh Freese wasn't the right fit for Foo Fighters. In April 2023, the Foos announced their 11th studio album, But Here We Are, their first album without Taylor Hawkins on drums since There's Nothing Left to Lose in 1999, and the first album to feature Dave Grohl drumming on most of the tracks since The Color and the Shape in 1997. Featuring songs like Rescued, Under You, The Glass, Show Me How, and the epic track The Teacher, But Here We Are was Dave Grohl expressing his grief over the death of Taylor Hawkins, as well as the death of his own mother, Virginia Grohl, who passed away in August of 2022. The album was emotional and visceral, but still had that signature Foo Fighters sound. It was great as a Foo Fighters record and as a way for Dave Grohl to express his grief. After the release of But Here We Are, the Foo Fighters stayed busy throughout 2023 and 2024 promoting the new record around the world. But it wasn't all smooth sailing in the wake of that album. Shortly after the end of the tour, Dave Grohl announced to the press that he had fathered a child out of wedlock, asking his family for forgiveness and later saying that he spent months in counseling to work on himself and regain the trust of his family. As a Foo Fighters fan, I don't really think it's our place to judge Dave Grohl and his infidelity and whatever's going on in his personal life. That's his own business. I'm much more interested in what's going on with his music, but a lot of fans felt betrayed by Dave at the time because he had presented this image of being a dedicated family man, which of course he is. Like, obviously he loves his family, but we really didn't know as much about the infidelity side of his personality. Not that it's any of our business, but a lot of people felt betrayed by that, and it took fans a little bit of time to move on. Fans also felt the fallout of the firing of Josh Freese. In May 2025, 2 years after the Foos hired him to be the new drummer of the band, he announced on social media that he was fired by the Foos without an explanation. Later on, it was confirmed by Dave Grohl and the band that they didn't feel that Josh Freese was the right fit, and that they all called him as a band to give him the news. Freese would later say that the Foo Fighters' music didn't really resonate with him, and that fans really shouldn't feel sorry for him because he has no problem finding other drumming gigs. I always felt that Josh Freese's drumming was a little bit too robotic, a little bit too calculated for the Foo Fighters. It was really hard to replicate the soul and the feel of what Taylor Hawkins offered to the band because he had been with them for decades before that. A very hard person to come in and fill the shoes for. Also, coming into a band like Foo Fighters where your lead singer is one of the best drummers of all time, that'd be a hard situation for any drummer to come into. Of course, Josh Freese would be just fine being one of the best drummers in the business, but the question was, with Josh Freese out, who would be in as the new drummer of Foo Fighters? Enter Ilan Rubin, the former drummer for Nine Inch Nails, among other bands, who was announced that he joined the Foo Fighters in July 2025. What's funny is that Josh Freese ended up going back to Nine Inch Nails, of which he was a member in the 2000s. Of course, it was a complete coincidence that the bands would essentially swap drummers. But it's clear that Ilan Rubin is a great addition to the Foo Fighters lineup. He seems to have more of that Foo Fighters feel than Josh Freese did. You know, sometimes it just takes time to find the right fit, and the Foos seem to have found it in Ilan. Which brings us to the now. We are on the cusp of the release of the Foo Fighters' 12th studio album, Your Favorite Toy, releasing on April the 24th. This is the first Foos album to feature Ilan Rubin on drums, the first drummer in Foo Fighters history to appear on a Foos record other than Dave Grohl and Taylor Hawkins. Well, except for Sunday Rain on Concrete and Gold, which featured Paul McCartney on drums, but I guess he was a little bit too busy to record on this album. The new album was recorded at the band's Studio 606 recording facility in Southern California and was produced by Oliver Roman, who takes over for Greg Kurstin, who produced the last 3 records. Dave Grohl has said that Your Favorite Toy is back to the high energy sound of the Foos after going in a more somber direction on But Here We Are. It has more of a modern indie rock energy mixed with slide solos and fuzzed out guitars. And this is evident from the tracks that we've heard so far from the record. The indie rock energy of Your Favorite Toy, the epic rock of Asking for a Friend, and the fuzzed out guitars on Caught in the Echo and Of All People. The Foos are also ready to hit the road with their Take Cover tour, including dates in the US, Canada, Australia, and Europe. This tour will take them well into 2027, and after that, who knows what will be next for Foo Fighters in the future. It's been a tumultuous road to the new album, Your Favorite Toy, full of death, drama, and drummers, but the band have emerged with a new record and a new era. After 30 years as a band, Foo Fighters are still going strong. Your Favorite Toy drops on April the 24th.